Joining me right now, a man we visited with throughout the election, now the Attorney General for the state of Texas, General Paxton. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's good to be back on. How are you doing?
Well, appreciate you coming on. Doing great. Out here, it's going to be 70 degrees today, so it's going to be a fantastic day out here in West Texas. Again, thanks for coming on. How's the transition going to the new office?
You know what? It's been really busy, but it's been a lot of fun to have the opportunity to do this work for the state of Texas.
Well, when you were sworn in, there were some editorials that were out there that were challenging you not to follow Greg Abbott's lead and challenging the federal government whenever you felt as though the federal government was, infringing on the state of Texas. I think you answered that by basically challenging the federal government over Obama's amnesty for illegal immigrants. Tell us a little bit about where we are in that process.
I will, and I'll first of all say this: the editorials don't match what I heard from the people of Texas.
Right.
As I traveled around the state for the last year and a half, so that particular sentiment that the papers hold does not match up at all with the citizens of this state. So as far as the amnesty case is, that we actually argued that last week in district court in Texas. We're actually waiting to hear the court's ruling. Obviously, we're opposed to Obama's executive action that he issued last November, which would basically ignore the federal Constitution and our statute and allow deportations and removals to stop.
And this is the state of Texas, and if I'm correct, 25 other states in this?
Yeah, it's actually amazing. I don't know, maybe it's happened before, but I don't know if there's ever been this many states ever suing the federal government.
Well, when you look at the way that the state of Texas and other states are going about this by taking the administration to court on this, do you believe this is a better way of attacking the amnesty and the executive actions that the president has taken rather than waiting for Congress to do anything if they ever actually do anything?
I think you almost answered my question, because I don't know if they're ever going to do anything. I think we made some really strong arguments. I think the president, if you look at his remarks over the last 6 years, I think over 20 times he said that he did not have the power to either ignore this law or create new law. And yet, literally months after the last time he said that, he issued this executive action in opposition to his own remarks over the last 6 to 7 years.
So where are we timeline on this, and where do you expect this to head?
Well, I really hope that we'll get a ruling sometime in February. The executive action supposedly going into effect in March. So we were hoping at least to get a preliminary injunction to stop it from going into effect. And we'll just have to see how the judge rules. From that point, then we'll be back in court at some point arguing on the merits of our arguments in the case.
And do you anticipate this going all the way up to the Supreme Court?
You never really know. It's one of those cases that has those type of implications. So it's possible, certainly possible.
Visiting with Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton here on the Chad Hasty Show on KFYO. Let me ask you about another case that's out there. And on Friday, we learned that the Supreme Court would take up the issue of gay marriage. And this does have an impact on Texas, as Texas right now in the courts dealing with gay marriage, waiting for the Fifth Circuit to weigh in. How does this impact the state of Texas and the current case that is pending?
Well, we had our own arguments on our marriage law that we passed. The people of Texas passed by 76% back in 2005. Those arguments took place the first week of January, and we're waiting on a ruling now from the Fifth Circuit. Meantime, as you just mentioned, the Sixth Circuit ruled in favor of allowing states to define marriage, and so now you have a split in the circuit. So I don't know whether the Fifth Circuit will rule before the Supreme Court takes it up. That's just a timing issue. So ultimately, the Supreme Court's going to make a ruling on this issue.
The case that's going to the Supreme Court, it's 4 states, correct? Kentucky, Michigan, Ohio, and Tennessee. Those are the cases that will be heard. will you have any, will you contact the attorney generals in those states, talk with them about, what's going on in Texas, or how does that work? How can Texas play into the decision?
Typically, obviously I've only been on the job for 2 weeks, but from my understanding of the way things work, the Republican attorneys general at least typically will talk about these issues and decide how they want to work together. I mean, you've seen it in this case with the amnesty that we just talked about, with 25 states signing on with Texas. So I have no doubt this will be a similar process.
Visiting with Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. Will the Fifth Circuit, if the Fifth Circuit comes out with an opinion, at the end of the day, will it matter?
Will the Fifth Circuit? Well, ultimately, the Supreme Court's going to decide the case. Yeah, it matters for our circuit, but within a very brief time, the Supreme Court's going to make a decision one way or the other. So, it matters, but and we'd certainly like to win that case because it helps our argument with the Supreme Court. But ultimately, the Supreme Court's going to make the decision.
Visiting with Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. General Paxton, what are some other areas that you're going to be taking a look at in the weeks and months ahead? Is there anything in particular?
Well, we also had we passed our pro-life bill last session. You'll remember it created the Wendy Davis story.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's it. But we also argued that case in front of the Fifth Circuit in the first week of January. So January, by the way, has been a pretty busy month for us. So we're waiting on a decision on our pro-life bill, and then we also have another case this coming week, in front of the Supreme Court on fair housing and whether this lawsuit will allow for a look at disparate impact, or whether when fair housing decisions are made, it's just based on intent. So we will have just this month 4 cases either at the Fifth Circuit Fifth Circuit, District Court, and the Supreme Court, all in January.
Your office had no downtime at all once you were sworn in, did you?
Literally, I took the oath of office. Greg Abbott, who's going to be our next governor, swore me in. I dropped my hand, and he said, "You're going to be the busiest attorney general in the history of the state when you start."
What do you? It sounds like it. 4 cases already, and more to come, I'm sure. What do you anticipate? Before I let you go, what do you anticipate the relationship between your office and the governor's office looking like?
I feel fortunate that he's becoming governor because we've had a good relationship. We've worked together over the last 12 years. We know each other well. They've been very helpful in our transition process. So I anticipate a really good working relationship, and certainly it's nice to be able to call them and say, "Hey, what were you all thinking in this case?" and they can get us up to speed on where they started, what they did, and why where we're at.
Excellent. Visit with General Paxton here on the program, and we will visit with him throughout the year, and anytime there's a lot of news out there dealing with the state of Texas and the courts. As always, the Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, you are welcome on the show. Appreciate you calling in today.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Have a great week.
You too. That's Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton here on the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 790 KFYO.